The front gates of Elite Performance BJJ Academy loomed taller than Sarah expected. Brushed steel embossed with a sweeping crest she didn't recognize stretched beyond them into what looked like a modern fortress of mats and mirrors. Black and gold dominated the space. Thick banners hung like commandments from the high ceiling, each embroidered with the names of past champions. Spotlights hummed overhead, casting pools of light across the open floor. In one corner, a wall-length mirror reflected the movement of athletes already drilling, their voices sharp, bodies coiled with practiced power. Coaches in matching black jackets barked commands in clipped voices. Fighters rolled on the mats with precise aggression, their branded gear stretched across defined frames, logos stitched in silver. Every GI was spotless, every belt tied with practiced arrogance. Sarah stepped inside, her white GI loose around her frame, unmarked by anything but time. The sandals on her feet were worn thin, the fabric strap frayed where it had been restitched by hand. Her hair, still damp from the rain outside, clung to her neck. No one looked at her directly, but the silence she carried followed her like a shadow. She moved without rush, her gaze scanning the gym's architecture as if memorizing it. No one offered help. A few glanced her way, then looked past her, uninterested. Her white belt hung loose, its faded edges nearly grey. To them, she was just another filler, another hopeful who wandered too far from the beginner's class. The head coach, Marcus Brennan, stood near the main mat with his clipboard. Broad-shouldered with a trimmed beard, he had the look of someone who'd built his reputation on breaking spirits as much as teaching technique. His eyes swept over Sarah briefly, cataloguing her like inventory he hadn't ordered. Sarah walked quietly toward the lockers, avoiding the main mat where two black belts slammed into position under Brennan's watchful eye. Around her, the air was thick with sweat, ambition, and ego. She said nothing. She had no entourage, no spotlight, only that belt around her waist and the silence she wore like armor. What none of them knew was that Sarah Mitchell had once been Sarah Chen, a name that had made headlines 3 years ago before it was buried under politics and paperwork. The white belt around her waist wasn't a beginning, it was a disguise. And she had come here with a purpose none of them could imagine. The first whispers started before she even stepped on the mat. First blood? These two first time Sarah stepped onto the mat, no one gave her a partner. She stood quietly near the edge, her bare feet on the padded floor, watching as the others paired off. Coach Brennan glanced in her direction but didn't call her over. After a few minutes of milling about, one of the assistants, Tyler Rodriguez, noticed her standing still and waved lazily. "Hey!" he called, gesturing toward a stack of folded towels. "If you're not training, grab those." She looked at him calmly. "I'm a participant," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. He blinked, then snorted. "Right. White belt, huh? You sure you're in the right room?" A few nearby athletes chuckled. No one corrected him. Sarah was eventually assigned a partner, a young man named Brandon Walsh with a thick neck and a fresh tattoo across his collarbone. He looked her up and down like she was a prop. "Just keep your limbs loose," he muttered. "It'll go faster that way." They began positional sparring. Sarah followed the instructions cleanly, offering no resistance as Brandon shifted through mounts and guards. Onlookers leaned against the wall, laughing quietly as he exaggerated his effort, grunting loudly with each pass. "Man, I'm working so hard here," he said, glancing toward a girl with a phone out. She aimed the camera as Brandon rolled Sarah onto her back with theatrical flair. "Look at this open-weight dominance, baby." The video surfaced, in a private group chat later that night. One clip had her caught in a headlock, eyes closed, sweat glinting along her brow. The caption read, "Charity round, white belt collapse." Someone added a slow-motion effect, looping her fall as music played over it. The post racked up over 70 laughing emojis before it was pulled into another thread. In the locker room, she found her bench already taken. 2 women in branded rash guards were leaning across it, talking loudly about travel sponsors. One of them looked over and pointed to Sarah's belt hanging damp on the hook. "Whose is this?" she asked, her nose wrinkling. "Looks like it came out of a thrift bin," said the other, glancing at Sarah. "Did you see her spa?" She moved like she learned BJJ from a YouTube ad. They didn't speak directly to her, they didn't need to. Sarah said nothing, just collected her belt and moved to a corner where she could sit alone. Her lunch, rice and carrots in a paper container, was eaten without comment, her back to the main table. Conversations flowed around her. Her name never came up. What they didn't see was Sarah's fingers tracing patterns on her knee as she ate. Muscle, memory from techniques she'd drilled 10,000 times. What they couldn't know was that every insult, every laugh, every dismissive glance was being filed away in a mind that had once calculated the downfall of opponents who thought they were untouchable. The white belt was temporary. The memory was forever. The demonstration dummy. During drills the next day, Sarah was told to be a demonstration partner for takedown entries. Coach Brennan gestured toward her vaguely, like choosing the least important item in the room. "You grab the G," he said. Sarah stepped forward as he demonstrated the hip throw. She allowed her body to follow the technique, her feet light, her arms reactive. He did it again and again, then invited the class to try it on her. A line formed. One by one, athletes gripped her lapels and sent her crashing to the mat. Some did it wrong, others too hard. Her shoulder bruised after the 5th attempt. By the 9th, her knee was already swelling. "You're doing great," one woman, Jessica Park, said with a false smile as she slammed Sarah to the floor. "Really taking one for the team." The assistant coach, standing nearby, grinned. Maybe she'll absorb something through osmosis. That evening, someone threw a towel at her feet in the hallway. It landed with a wet slap against the tiles, water splashing onto her ankle. She glanced up to see a tall competitor, Derek Manning, walking past, earbuds in, not looking back. "Thought you were staff," he said over his shoulder. In the dining hall, the jokes followed her like smoke. A new post had gone up, this one showing her mismatched Jai pants from the back. The caption read, "Lost and Found's newest member." A few chuckles rose when she walked in. Nobody said her name. She did her laundry at night in the small machines tucked behind the training building, while the others scrolled through their highlight reels or played card games in the lounge. Sarah stood quietly, folding her Jai with slow, practiced hands. One night, her belt wasn't where she left it. She found it in the communal sink, soaked and stained, the ends tied together in a loose knot. No note, no explanation, just water dripping, steadily onto the tile. She wrung it out without a word, took it back to her bunk, and laid it flat to dry. During warm-ups, she was often asked to hold pads. It wasn't required, but she never declined. A few athletes liked using her as a warm-up partner. They said it was like hitting a sponge. She never flinched, never smiled. Her eyes stayed steady. She was invisible, but not forgotten. Her presence lingered in their humor, their sarcasm, their clips. She had become a kind of camp joke, the girl who didn't belong, the filler, the ghost in the room who absorbed all the punishment without pushing back. But late at night, when the gym emptied and the lights dimmed, Sarah would slip into the secondary training room. There, with no cameras and no audience, she would move through sequences that told a different story entirely. Fluid, precise, devastating. The white belt around her waist never seemed quite right in those moments, like a costume that didn't fit the person wearing it. The janitor's discovery. The main mats shut down just after 10, lights dimming in segments overhead, one row at a time, until only the exit signs glowed faint red against the walls. Footsteps faded, laughter gave way to silence. The metallic clack of lockers and the hiss of showers were the last signs of life as the athletes cleared out. Sarah stayed, seated on the wooden bench just outside the secondary mat room. Her GI top was folded neatly in her lap. She wound white tape slowly around her right wrist, turning it with her thumb, smoothing each layer flat. The tape was faded in places, fraying slightly near the edges. She checked the fit, gave the wrap a small tug, then flexed her fingers twice and stood. The smaller room didn't have cameras, just padded walls and 2 long strips of older mat marked with lines for drilling. No banners, no names. A single light hummed from the corner ceiling, casting a wide oval glow that flattened the space. It was cold, clean, and still. Sarah stepped barefoot onto the mat and closed her eyes. Her left hand came up instinctively, pulling at a phantom collar. Her right foot rotated to base, then she dropped to her hip, rolled, and posted with fluid motion. She didn't stop. She transitioned again. Shrimp, hip escape, shoulder roll, invert. Her breathing stayed low and steady, not hurried, not loud. Her body moved with the rhythm of memory, not performance. Each movement flowed into the next. Her hands did not fumble. Her back stayed low to the mat. When she posted into a sit-up guard, her hips were exactly where they needed to be. She kept her eyes open now, scanning invisible opponents, adjusting grips she wasn't holding. The repetition didn't tire her. It focused her. She moved through the drills like someone unlearning the shame they'd been assigned. In the far corner, the soft squeak of a mop bucket broke the rhythm. Frank Torres, the janitor, paused in the doorway. He stood with one hand on the handle, the other tucked into a pocket. He was older, grey at the temples, sunken eyes. He didn't say a word, just watched. Sarah continued. She reset, dropped into an open guard transition, swept an invisible ankle and spun into a knee-cut pass. Her palm slapped the mat softly for balance. Her breath stayed calm. Frank took 2 quiet steps forward. The mop handle rested against his shoulder now. He tilted his head slightly as she shifted to mount, then into a triangle setup. Her posture was flawless. He'd seen a lot of athletes in this building. None moved like that. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his presence. Her focus never slipped. She drilled 3 more passes, then sat back on her knees and picked up a phone from the wall. The screen was cracked at the corner. She tapped it twice, scrolled to an old folder. A paused video lit the frame. Her face, younger, blood in her, mouth locking in a triangle choke against a fighter twice her size. She pressed play. The footage was rough from a shaky phone camera, but the move was precise. Her hips flared, her knee pulled down, her ankles locked. The crowd in the background exploded. Frank didn't move. She watched for 8 seconds, then shut the screen off and stood again. One more round. Her fingers tapped her thighs twice before she resumed motion. This time she moved faster. Transitions linked tighter, spins sharper, timing honed. Her body remembered pressure, weight, resistance. She knew the angles without mirrors. She'd been here before, in another gym, under another name, wearing another belt. She rolled once more, finished in technical mount, sat still. Frank cleared his throat softly, then turned and left. Sarah exhaled, through her nose and looked down at her wrist. The tape had begun to curl at the edge. She peeled it off, folded it into itself, and dropped it in the bin. Then she bowed to the empty mat, gathered her things, and stepped into the quiet hallway. Without a sound, tomorrow everything would change. The setup. The gym was louder than usual. Bright overhead lights poured onto the main mat, sharpening every edge. Folding chairs lined the edges for scouts and media staff. Tripods stood at the corners. The camp had promised an open exhibition, no stakes, just a showcase of skill. Most of the athletes wore their best gear, logos centered, belts freshly tied. The energy buzzed with practiced confidence. Sarah sat in the back, her name nowhere on the board, her presence unnoticed, until a staffer jogged over, headset askew. Sarah.
"Mitchell," he called, reading from a clipboard. "You're on deck. Mat 2, match 5 against Ethan Vale." Heads turned.
Then snickers. Then open laughter. "Are they serious?" someone muttered. "She's still here?" Ethan Vale was already stretching, surrounded by cameras. His smile was easy, calculated. The golden boy of the camp, undefeated in exhibition matches, with sponsors lining up to attach their names to his rising star. He stepped forward with casual amusement, offering a low bow. "Didn't know they were doing white belt demos today," he said under his breath. "Hope your insurance is paid up." Sarah gave no reply. She had spent 3 years waiting for this moment. Not this exact scenario, but the chance to step back into the light on her own terms. The politics that had destroyed her career, the overturned results, the backroom deals that had branded her as unmarketable, all of it had led to this unlikely stage. The match began. She stayed low, centered, hands steady. He feinted twice. She didn't bite. On his first grip, she broke contact and circled. The crowd noise dipped. Ethan moved in harder. Sarah caught an underhook and rotated under. Her hips turned, knees cut in. She swept. For a split second, his balance shifted. A murmur moved through the onlookers. Then he exploded. He twisted violently, lifted her mid-turn, and slammed her back first into the mat. The impact was sharp, brutal. The sound cracked across the room. Sarah didn't move. A beat of silence followed, then a scout's voice whispered to someone behind a camera. "Cut the stream." Ethan stood breathing hard. His expression had shifted, no longer playful. He didn't look at her. 2 coaches crossed the mat without urgency. One knelt beside her, checked her pulse, then signaled to a staff member. They rolled her gently onto her side, then lifted her onto a stretcher. No announcement was made. No one clapped. No one asked if she'd return. The lights didn't dim. The cameras reset. The next match was called without delay. But in the medical bay, as Sarah sat up slowly and tested her ribs, she wasn't thinking about the pain. She was thinking about the brief moment when Ethan's confidence had cracked, when his balance had shifted, when she'd felt the familiar weight of an opponent, realizing they were in deeper water than they'd expected. The exhibition had shown her exactly what she needed to know. Now it was time to show them what 3 years of exile had taught her. The bracket revelation, Sarah's name, appeared on the bracket board in fading ink, wedged awkwardly at the bottom corner. It wasn't printed. It was handwritten, like a late edition, or a clerical error. The open-weight division was supposed to be the highlight of the day, a final flourish for the Federation scouts and sponsors gathered in the top row. No one expected anything from her. Most barely remembered she was still in the building. A ripple of laughter passed through the spectators when her name was read aloud. Some tilted their phones to record what they assumed would be a fast, forgettable loss. Her first opponent, Tommy Briggs, a middleweight blue belt with fast hands and an easy grin, approached her with the casual air of someone who'd already won. He slapped her hand lightly, gripped her collar, and drove forward. Sarah didn't resist. She redirected. He overcommitted. 19 seconds later, she was standing again, one knee down, his hand tapping furiously against her forearm as the armbar locked in. The referee paused, checking both expressions. Sarah let go without looking at anyone. Briggs rolled away in disbelief. A few people clapped, uncertain whether to be amused or impressed. Her second match was against a heavier grappler known for brute strength and single-leg drives. He underestimated her guard. She baited him, shifted her hips, and swept him flat. Mounted, transitioned, finished with a cross-collar choke so tight it took him 5 seconds to sit upright afterward. Now the crowd quieted. The third opponent wore a black belt. He moved cautiously. He gripped tighter. She stayed lower, more patient. When he tried to pass, she inverted and took his back in one smooth, fluid motion. Hooks in, choke set, tap. Coaches started standing. The live stream feed, once filled with comments mocking the filler, now flashed with new messages. Who is she? What gym is she from? Re-watching that sweep. By her fourth match, the athletes who had laughed at her now watched in silence. Phones hovered over the edge of the bleachers. The bracket was being updated in real time. Her name, no longer smudged in ink, was underlined on the screen in bold. Her fifth opponent, Devon Blitz Reynolds, was a rising star with sponsorship deals and a flawless record at regionals. He stepped onto the mat with careful confidence, already sweating. Sarah didn't look at him. She bowed, gripped, moved. He sprawled, tried to reset, but she dragged him off balance, slid under, and flipped. The entire gym fell still as she executed a flawless transition from De La Riva guard to side control, then floated effortlessly into mount. His defense tightened. Her pressure tightened more. The choke came from nowhere. He didn't just tap, he gasped. His coach shouted something no one heard. The live stream's commentator went silent for a moment before whispering, "That was perfect jiu-jitsu." The crowd stood. Phones were everywhere now. A scout at the far edge took out a clipboard and scribbled something down. Sarah sat on her heels, at the mat's edge, calm, untouched by the noise. Then they called the final name. Ethan Vale entered with swagger, the favored face of the camp, wearing a custom GI with his name embroidered across the shoulder. He grinned as he faced her again, stepping casually onto the mat. "Let's finish this," he said, low enough that only she could hear. She didn't answer. The gym was packed now, every chair filled. The live stream chat had spiked in viewers. Coaches leaned forward. This was the moment she'd been building toward, not just tonight, but for 3 years. The 9-second finish, the match began. Ethan surged in hard, grabbing high and low, trying to unbalance her early. Sarah stepped to the side, baited his grip, slipped out, and rolled under. He chased, fast, too fast, and she caught his leg, hooked deep, swept. He hit the mat harder than he expected. The sound echoed. Sarah didn't press. She flowed. Side control. Ethan twisted. She followed. He bridged. She posted. He tried to scramble, but she was already behind him, both hooks in. She didn't squeeze. Yet. She waited. Then she took the collar. The moment his hand shot up to tap, The gym erupted. Shouts, applause, chairs scraping back, every phone raised. Sarah let go the instant he tapped. She stood slowly. Ethan lay on his side, blinking up. At the ceiling, his mouth open like he was trying to understand what had just happened. The referee raised her hand. She didn't smile. She didn't look at the crowd. She bowed, stepped off the mat, and tied her belt tighter around her waist. 9 seconds, someone whispered. That was 9 seconds. The number rippled through the crowd like wildfire. 9 seconds to take down the camp's golden boy. 9 seconds to dismantle 3 years of carefully constructed arrogance. A man in a navy blazer stepped forward, older, his Federation patch sewn carefully onto his breast pocket, a clipboard tucked under one arm. He conferred briefly with the referee, then turned towards Sarah. His expression was unreadable, part calculation, part awe. Without ceremony, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. The Federation's emblem was stamped cleanly across the front. "This is yours," he said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard. "International Team, Open Weight Division." Sarah took it without hesitation. She didn't look down. She didn't check the name. She already knew it was right. Behind her, someone stepped forward. Coach Brennan, the assistant who had once used her as a demonstration dummy, now wore a forced smile. "We had our eye on her," he said to the man beside him. "Knew there was something there. She just needed a little polish." He didn't finish the sentence. Another coach said nothing at all, his jaw set, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, as he watched Sarah take her place in the center of the mat. Around them, the gym buzzed, but she remained still. The bracket was being updated on the giant digital display above the stage. Her name, once scribbled at the bottom in shaky hand, now glowed in bold letters, circled in gold by the system. Cameras zoomed in, screenshots exploded across social. Media.A reporter crossed the floor, weaving past the other athletes. He carried a microphone in a cautious tone. "Excuse me," he said, stopping just short of her. "We didn't get your name on the stream. Could you tell us who you are?" She looked at him for the first time. Her expression didn't change, but she spoke. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she said, voice even. "I was Sarah Chen 3 years ago, national finalist. I submitted a medalist in the semis. They overturned the result, called it excessive force. Political call. They said I didn't represent the right image." The room was silent again. She let the words hang, then added, "I wasn't here to redeem anything. I just wanted to finish what I started." She handed the microphone back. In the crowd, someone lowered their camera. A few of the other women, those who had once whispered over locker room benches, stood in place now, quiet. One of them looked down at her own belt as if seeing it for the first time. The 9 seconds had become an earthquake. The reckoning, the aftermath, came in waves. First, the immediate scramble, phones buzzing, coaches huddling, Federation officials making hurried calls. Then the deeper reckoning, as the full scope of what had just happened began to sink in. Sarah Mitchell, the woman they'd treated as a training dummy for 2 weeks, had just embarrassed their star athlete on a live stream watched by thousands. The video of Ethan's 9-second submission was already going viral, shared across every BJJ forum and social media platform. But more than that, the revelation of her true identity sent shockwaves through the community. Sarah Chen's case had been controversial 3 years ago, a rising star whose career was ended not by defeat, but by politics. The overturned result, the excessive force ruling, the whispered conversations about marketability and image, all of it was being dragged. Back into the light, Coach Brennan found himself in damage control mode, fielding calls from sponsors and Federation officials. The same man who had dismissed Sarah as worthless filler was now trying to explain how his elite training program had failed to identify one of the most dangerous grapplers in the sport. "We always recognized her potential," he told one reporter, "the lie coming easily." Sometimes talent needs the right environment to flourish, but the athletes knew better. The videos were still there, Sarah being used as a demonstration dummy, the jokes in the group chats, the deliberate humiliation. Jessica Park, who had made the taking one for the team comment, found her own social media accounts flooded with criticism from people who'd seen the footage. Brandon Walsh, the young man who'd theatrically dominated Sarah in their first sparring session, watched the 9-second finish on repeat, trying to reconcile the woman he'd manhandled with the fighter who'd just destroyed Ethan Vale. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Frank Torres, the janitor, smiled quietly as he mopped the floors that night. He'd seen the truth in that empty training room, the fluid movements, the perfect technique, the respect she'd shown to the mat. He'd known she was special. He was the only one who wasn't surprised. The international team selection was just the beginning. Within hours, Sarah's phone was buzzing with offers, sponsorships, training opportunities, interview requests. The same industry that had blacklisted her 3 years ago was now desperate to attach itself to her story. But Sarah wasn't interested in their validation anymore. She'd proven what she came to prove. The white belt, that symbol of her exile, was retired that night, replaced by the black belt she'd never officially been allowed to wear. As she packed her belongings, Sarah reflected on the journey. The humiliation had been real, the pain genuine. But it had also been temporary. What wasn't temporary was the strength she'd built in silence, the technique she'd perfected in empty rooms, the unshakable knowledge of her own worth. The last thing she did before leaving was to write a note and leave it in Frank's cleaning cart. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else would." 3 years later, Sarah Mitchell would win her first world championship. The victory would be dominant, technical, and utterly convincing. But those who knew her story understood that the real victory had happened on a random Tuesday night at Elite Performance BJJ Academy, when a woman in a faded white belt had reminded the world that respect isn't given, it's taken. The gym fell quiet after she left. The mats were swept, the lights dimmed, the doors locked. But something had changed in that space, something that would linger long after the controversy died
Down.
Sometimes the ones they ignore are the ones rewriting the ending. And sometimes justice comes not with a gavel, but with a 9-second submission that changes everything. In the end, Sarah Mitchell hadn't just won a tournament bracket. She'd reclaimed her name, her dignity, and her future. The laughter had stopped, the respect had begun, and that 9-second finish, it would be studied, analyzed, and remembered long after everyone forgot Ethan Vale's name. The quiet ones, it turned out, were often the most dangerous of all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.